He was mopping the hallway when the calculus teacher, Mr. Langford, pointed at him and laughed. "Hey, why not give this one a try, genius?" he said, scribbling a massive calculus problem on the board while his students chuckled. The janitor paused, looked at the board, then walked away in silence. But 20 minutes later, when class ended, he quietly returned, erased part of the solution Mr. Langford had written, and replaced it with 3 precise lines. The students went silent. The teacher stared. His hands trembled. That was not just correct, it was elegant, almost poetic. "Where are you watching this story from? Comment your city or country. I would love to know where you are right now." Everyone in the room stared at the board, then at the janitor, then at each other. How did you do that?" Mr. Langford finally asked, his voice less mocking now. The janitor simply smiled, wiped his hands on a cloth, and said, "Just something I remembered." He turned and left, leaving the entire class stunned. Rumors spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, every table in the cafeteria was buzzing about the mysterious janitor who solved a problem most students could not even read. A senior named Carly ran to the library and pulled out the calculus textbook. She stared at the problem again, trying to match the janitor's steps. It's not in here," she whispered. "He did something different. Smarter." Back in the teacher's lounge, Mr. Langford was still shaken. "That man isn't just a janitor," he mumbled to the math department head. "He saw something I couldn't see." No one knew his name. Everyone just called him Mr. Fix-It because he fixed broken sinks, jammed lockers, and now, apparently, unsolvable math problems. But who was he really? And why was he working as a janitor in a small-town high school? That evening, the principal called him into the office. "We need to talk," she said, her expression unreadable. He walked into the principal's office like he had walked into every room in that school, quietly, humbly, with no sense of importance. His uniform was faded, his shoes scuffed, but his presence carried an odd stillness that made people pause. Principal Green sat behind her desk, fingers interlaced, eyes narrowed. Not in suspicion, but in confusion. "Mr. Daniels," she began, "I believe we owe you an apology and maybe a few answers as well." He remained standing, a polite but guarded look on his face. "I was just doing my job, ma'am." "No, you were not," she replied, her tone shifting. "That problem you solved?" Langford said it was from a university-level textbook used in senior graduate research. Not even he remembered the solution clearly. "But you walked in, glanced at it, and rewrote it like you had been teaching it for decades. That's not normal." He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "Does it bother you that I could?" She blinked. "It surprises me. Deeply." There was silence for a beat. Then, softly, she asked, "Who are you, really?" He smiled faintly. "I was once someone else. A long time ago. A professor. MIT." The words dropped like stones in a still pond. "But why?" she asked. "Why are you here, cleaning floors in a school where students cannot even pronounce differential equations properly?" Mr. Daniels looked toward the window. Outside, a student chased a paper plane across the field. "Because sometimes," he said, "life rewrites your equations. And you either learn to solve them or you get stuck." She wanted to ask more, but something in his expression told her she would not get further tonight. The next day, it was not just the students who watched him differently. Teachers nodded when they passed him in the halls. Students whispered less and listened more. But not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Langford, whose pride had taken a bruising hit, was not ready to let it go. He cornered Daniels near the boiler room and hissed, "You think you're clever? You embarrass me." Daniels met his glare calmly. "No. You embarrassed yourself when you underestimated people." Langford's face darkened. "You don't belong here." Daniels leaned in slightly. Neither did Einstein in his time. And then he walked away again, leaving Langford speechless and the mystery deeper than ever. That week, everything began to shift around the school. Students who had never even noticed Mr. Daniels before now greeted him with curious eyes and hesitant smiles. Some even stopped to ask him questions about math, about life, about how he knew what he knew. And every time, He gave just enough of an answer to spark more questions, then quietly returned to sweeping the hallways like nothing had changed. But something had. Carly, the senior who first tried to trace his solution, could not let it go. She stayed after school and waited by the janitor's closet, her notebook in hand. When he finally came by with his mop bucket, she stepped in front of him. "Can you teach me?" she asked, her voice almost trembling. Mr. Daniels paused. "Why do you want to learn from someone like me?" "Because," she said, "no one has ever made me want to understand it. You did." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he had not seen in years: hunger. Not for grades or college admissions or praise. Hunger for truth. For understanding. He nodded once. "Then meet me here at 7, before school starts." Word spread. By the third morning, 5 students were waiting. By the 5th, there were 13. They sat on the cold floor outside the science lab, notebooks in laps, eyes fixed on the janitor, who had become something else entirely. He never lectured. He asked questions. He made them think. And slowly, they started seeing the world differently. Through numbers, patterns, problems, and potential. But Principal Green was watching closely. Not because she distrusted him, but because she feared what the school board might say if they found out a janitor had become the most effective educator in the building without permission. She called an emergency staff meeting. "Should we allow this?" one teacher asked. "Do we have a choice?" said another. "The students are learning more in 1 week than they have in a semester." But not everyone agreed. "He has no credentials anymore," Mr. Langford sneered. "If anything happens, if a student fails or complains, it'll be on us. He's not even a teacher." Principal Green remained silent, then finally said, "But maybe he's what these kids need." Outside that room, Mr. Daniels stood quietly, having heard every word. He turned and walked away without reacting. But that night, for the first time in years, he pulled an old wooden box from under his bed. Inside, dust-covered, were his MIT credentials, academic medals, and a photo of him with a Nobel laureate. He stared at them, fingers brushing the past. Then he closed the lid and whispered, "Not yet. Not until they are ready." He was not done rewriting equations, especially the ones written about who deserved to teach and who deserved to be heard. It was a Thursday morning when something unexpected happened. The superintendent of the district, Mr. Harold Granger, showed up at the school unannounced. His black SUV rolled into the parking lot like a storm cloud. Rumors spread fast. Someone had tipped him off. By second period, he was already in Principal Green's office, demanding answers. "I hear your janitor has been running unauthorized math lessons before school hours," he asked coldly. Green tried to explain. "Sir, the students are excelling. They're showing real progress. He's not doing this for money or credit. He's just—" "I don't care if he walks on water," Granger snapped. "He is not qualified. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen." Meanwhile, in the back hallway, Carly and the others were setting up for their morning session. Mr. Daniels looked at them, as if sensing something in the air. "No session today," he said quietly. "Why not?" Carly asked. He did not answer, just packed his notes and walked away. Moments later, Granger and 2 board members confronted him near the supply closet. "You will cease these activities immediately," Granger ordered. "If I hear you've been instructing students again, you're done here." Mr. Daniels looked at him with the same calmness he had shown when solving that board problem. "Then fire me," he said softly. Granger blinked. "Excuse me? I'd rather lose my job than my soul," Daniels replied. "But know this, if you stop them from learning, you're not protecting the system. You're just protecting your fear of being exposed." Granger's jaw tensed, but he said nothing more. By lunchtime, the school was buzzing again. Students were angry. Even some teachers were upset. Carly marched to Principal Green's office, with a petition in her hand. "If he goes," she said, "we go." Green tried to calm her, but it was no use. The spark had been lit. And while the adults argued in meetings behind closed doors, Daniels quietly walked to the back of the library, took a seat at the old chalkboard there, and began solving another equation, one left half-finished by a struggling student. It was not just about calculus anymore.
It was about dignity, possibility, change.
That night, Carly posted a video on social media. She spoke from her heart, sitting outside the school. We've all been taught by people with degrees. But I've never learned as much as I have from a janitor who believed in us. The video went viral. Within 24 hours, it had over 300,000 views. The comments poured in. Hire that man. I wish I had a teacher like him. This is why the system needs change. And then came the email that would change everything. The email arrived early Saturday morning, buried beneath a dozen alerts and district memos. Principal Green almost missed it until she saw the sender's name, Dr. Walter Kingsley, chair of mathematics at MIT. Subject line: regarding Mr. Daniels. She clicked it open with cautious hands. I have seen the video circulating. That man was once my student. Later, he was my colleague. And for a short while, my mentor. What he is doing now, teaching in your halls without recognition, should not be dismissed. It should be honored. Let me be clear, if you fire him, MIT will hire him back. But I sincerely hope your school has the wisdom not to lose what you have. Green leaned back in her chair, heart racing. She forwarded the email to the superintendent without a single word, then stood up and walked outside into the fresh morning air. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniels sat at his modest kitchen table, sipping weak coffee, watching the sunrise. He had not checked his phone. He had not seen the viral video or the headlines. He was not expecting visitors. But at exactly 9:02 a.m., someone knocked. He opened the door to find Carly, tears in her eyes and phone in her hand. You have to see this, she whispered. He watched the video, silently. Then read the top comment. Then the second. Then the third. His hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of something he had buried long ago. Recognition. Worth. Why are they saying all this? He asked quietly. Because, Carly said, you gave us something school never did. You made us feel seen. An hour later, Principal Green called an emergency school assembly. The auditorium buzzed with confused students and curious faculty. Then, she walked onto the stage and tapped the mic. I want to talk about a man most of you walk past every day without a second thought. A man whose brilliance hid behind mop buckets and silence. That ends today. She turned. From the wings, Mr. Daniels stepped out, still in his janitor uniform, hands tucked in his pockets. The room went silent. From now on, Green said, her voice steady, Mr. Daniels will serve as our official mentor and mathematics coach. And if anyone has a problem with that, they are welcome to take it up with MIT. The students erupted. Some clapped. Some stood. Carly cried. Mr. Langford sat frozen, jaw clenched. But the loudest sound in the room was respect. Daniels stepped up to the podium, took the mic, and for the first time in years, looked out at a room full of people not judging him, but waiting for him to speak. And when he finally did, he said only this. I may have fallen from the ivory tower, but down here, I remembered how to build ladders for others. And with that, he stepped down. But what he had built that day would rise far beyond the walls of that school. By Monday morning, the entire school felt different. The bell rang like it always did, but the energy in the halls had shifted. Students gathered near the library before their classes started, not to gossip, but to learn. Notebooks were open. Eyes were wide. And Mr. Daniels, no longer just the janitor, stood at the front of the room with a piece of chalk in his hand and a line of students waiting to ask him questions. He still wore his janitor uniform, still carried his keys. But something about the way students treated him had changed. They called him Sir now. Not out of formality, but out of respect. Even some teachers began to sit in on his sessions. Mr. Thompson from the science department scribbled notes like a first-year student. Mrs. Elkins from English admitted, I never understood calculus until I heard him explain it like a story. Mr. Langford, however, was nowhere to be seen. He had taken an unexpected leave of absence, and whispers filled the teachers' lounge. Some said he was humiliated. Others said he had filed a complaint. But nobody knew for sure. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniels was changing lives one morning at a time. He never once spoke about himself. He never shared the full story of what led him here. But the students began to uncover fragments. A few old articles surfaced online. Mentions of a rising star in theoretical mathematics. A scandal involving a paper he refused to sign off on. Accusations that were never proven, but which ended his career overnight. Truth gets buried, he told Carly when she finally asked him. But it does not die. It waits. And now it had waited long enough. 3 weeks later, a film crew arrived from a national news network. They had seen the viral video. They wanted an interview. Mr. Daniels declined, but Principal Green convinced him. The interview aired on a Sunday night. Across the country, millions watched as a humble man in a janitor's uniform broke down a complex math problem and then smiled shyly at the camera. "I clean the halls," he said. "But sometimes, you find the brightest minds where nobody's looking." By Monday, his inbox was full. Offers from universities. Apologies from past colleagues. Even a handwritten letter from the Secretary of Education, calling him a living reminder of the human potential hidden in plain sight. But Mr. Daniels stayed. He stayed for the students. For Carly. For the quiet kids who never raised their hands until he taught them that failure was just another step in learning. And one day, when Carly got her acceptance letter from MIT, she ran across the courtyard screaming, "I got in." He just smiled and said, "Then make sure you teach someone else when it's your turn." Because that was his legacy, not a return to fame or status, but building ladders. One step, one mind, one morning at a time. Graduation day came with golden sunlight and restless excitement. Students milled about the football field in pressed gowns, decorated caps, and eyes full of hope. Families gathered in the bleachers, phones in hand, ready to capture one of life's proudest milestones. Carly sat in the front row, valedictorian sash around her neck, fingers trembling around the speech she was about to give. But her eyes kept drifting toward the back of the crowd, toward the man in the janitor's uniform leaning quietly against a fence, watching without expectation. When her name was called, she rose. The crowd erupted in cheers, but she did not walk straight to the podium. Instead, she took a sharp turn and walked toward him. The cheering quieted. Every camera turned. She stopped in front of him, handed him her speech, and said into the microphone, "I wrote something about grades and hard work and future plans. But that is not the truth I need to share today." She turned and pointed to Mr. Daniels. "This man is the reason I am standing here. He didn't just teach me calculus. He taught me confidence. He taught me patience. He taught me how to believe that I was more than a grade or a college application." The silence across the stadium was powerful. And if this school gave him a mop when it should have given him a classroom, then let today be the day we start seeing people for what they are, not just for what they're labeled. Mr. Daniels stood frozen. His throat tightened. His eyes, for the first time in years, brimmed with tears. Principal Green walked up to the stage. Without a word, she gestured to him. The students roared in unison.
Speech. Speech.
Speech. Carly took his hand and gently led him up. The microphone stood tall in front of him. He looked at the sea of faces, young, old, proud, curious, and took a slow breath. "I failed once," he began. "Not at math, but at trusting the world to be fair. I let the bitterness define me for years. I gave up everything I had worked for because I believed it no longer mattered." He paused, eyes locking with Carly's. But then a student asked me a question, and suddenly, everything I thought was over began again. He looked out at the crowd. Never judge the value of someone by the title on their name badge. Genius, compassion, courage, they can live anywhere, even in a janitor's closet. The field erupted with applause. Not polite, not scripted, real. And long after the caps were tossed, the photos taken, and the speeches ended, Mr. Daniels stayed. He helped fold chairs. He cleaned the bleachers. He picked up empty water bottles with the same quiet dignity he always had. Because some people do not need the world to tell them who they are. They already know. And now, so did everyone else. Summer came, and the school hallways grew quiet again. Lockers were shut tight, classrooms dark, bulletin boards still clinging to faded posters. But one door always remained slightly open, room 12B, once an old storage closet, now converted into a quiet study nook by none other than Mr. Daniels himself. He came in every morning like clockwork, just as he always had. Only now, he was not there to mop floors or fix broken sinks. He was there for the kids who stayed behind, the ones retaking classes, the ones preparing for early college programs, the ones whose homes were too loud or too empty. He taught them not just math, but logic,
Curiosity.
self-worth. One morning, a boy named Tyler walked in, his hoodie pulled low, eyes red from crying. He slammed his notebook on the desk and said, "I'm not smart. I can't get it. I'm done." Mr. Daniels did not scold him. He simply sat down, pulled the notebook toward him, and asked, "Who told you that you weren't smart?" Tyler shrugged. "Everyone." Daniels nodded. "Then maybe it's time you start listening to someone else." They worked for 2 hours. And by the end of it, Tyler had solved the same equation that made him cry. He looked up with disbelief. "I actually did it." Daniels smiled. "Of course you did. You just needed someone to believe in you until you could do it yourself." Word of his summer sessions spread to nearby towns. Parents started calling. Teachers from other districts came to observe. One afternoon, a retired university professor visited him, shook his hand, and said, "You're doing more good here than most of us did in lecture halls." But Mr. Daniels never let it change him. He still kept his janitor's uniform neatly pressed. He still fixed the occasional leaky pipe. And he still walked home every day, never owning a car, never asking for more. Until one September morning, when Principal Green stopped him outside room 12B with a letter in her hand. "It's from a state board," she said, voice trembling. "They want to give you an honorary teaching license. You'd be official. No more limits. Full authority to teach." Daniels stared at the envelope. It felt heavier than paper. "I didn't do this for titles," he said. "I know," Green replied. "But sometimes, the world finally catches up to the truth." He opened the envelope. Inside was the formal certificate and a short handwritten note from the Education Commissioner. Asterisk, "Some educators shape minds. You, Mr. Daniels, are shaping futures." Asterisk. That day, the school held a surprise assembly. Mr. Daniels walked onto the stage in front of hundreds of students, now with a name badge that read, "Mr. Nathaniel Daniels, faculty." No longer hidden. No longer overlooked. No longer just a janitor.